There are times in life, dark, unrelenting times, when it feels as though the heavens have closed their ears. You pray, you plead, you cry out, and the only thing that answers back is silence. And that silence, it's deafening. It's not just the absence of sound, it's the weight of abandonment. It's the terrifying suspicion that no one is listening, and worse, that no one cares. But I want to challenge that assumption today. I want to insist, that silence does not mean absence. Silence might in fact be the most deliberate answer of all. Because when God is silent, He's not indifferent, He's purposeful. He's shaping you in ways you cannot yet understand. And if you listen carefully, not just with your ears, but with your life, you'll find the silence was not a void, but a forge. You are not alone in your waiting. You're not weak because you're in pain, and you're not abandoned because heaven seems quiet. In silence, your character is tempered. In silence, your resolve is tested. In silence, your ego dies and your soul learns to breathe. It's easy to trust when the path is lit and clear, but true faith, authentic, deep, unshakable faith, is forged in darkness. You discover who you are when you don't get answers, when the comfort doesn't come, and when the noise disappears. And so instead of asking why God is silent, ask what He's doing with the silence. Because the silence, it's not empty, it's sacred, it's preparation. And when the time is right, when your soul is ready, the silence will break. And what fills its place will be something you were made for all along. So don't give up. You're not forgotten, you're being built. When we encounter silence, especially in moments of distress, it can feel like a cosmic dismissal. We reach out in desperation, praying, crying, begging for some sign, some whisper, some reassurance. And what we're met with is nothing. Just the stark quiet, no intervention, no explanation, no signal that we're even being heard. It's human to equate that silence with abandonment. We imagine that the lack of response means God has turned His back, or worse, that He was never there in the first place. But that assumption is more a reflection of our fear than of reality. Silence is not the absence of presence. It's the presence of purpose. When a parent watches their child take their first steps, they don't rush in to catch them at every stumble. They allow the fall because they know the falling is how strength is built. Likewise, the silence of God doesn't imply that He has stopped caring. It implies that something deeper is being built. Something beyond the surface. In those quiet seasons when nothing seems to move, it's easy to feel invisible. But it's often in those exact moments that we are being watched most closely, not judged, but trusted. It's important to recognize that our longing for immediate answers, for comfort on demand, speaks more to our discomfort with uncertainty than it does to the absence of divine intention. We live in a world that values instant results, fast feedback, and quick fixes. But the soul doesn't operate on that clock. The soul matures in time, not in haste. And the silence, that excruciating, stretching silence, is sometimes the only environment in which that maturation can happen. You see, God's silence might be the clearest indicator that He is doing something you're not meant to interfere with. It's the sacred space where your will confronts your limitations, where your ego is humbled, and where endurance becomes not just a necessity, but a virtue. We're so quick to interpret silence as a no, but often it's a not yet, or more mysteriously, it's a watch and wait. And in that waiting, something remarkable takes shape. Trust that is not based on feelings. Hope that is not dependent on outcomes. And faith that stands on its own legs. What we have to understand is that God's apparent silence is not a sign of his absence, but of his confidence in your strength. It's not abandonment. It's an invitation to lean deeper into trust, to stop searching for proof and start living as if the proof is already inside you. Pain is one of the few experiences that doesn't need translation. It speaks a language that every soul understands, and when it strikes, it does so without mercy. But while pain feels like destruction in the moment, it often carries within it the architecture of something greater, something necessary. It's easy to see pain as an interruption to life, an unfortunate detour from the path we were meant to be on. But what if pain isn't the detour? What if it's the path itself? Pain has a way of stripping us down to the essential. It removes the noise, the distractions, the illusions we cling to about who we are and what we think we need. It forces us into confrontation with ourselves, with our limitations, and with the uncomfortable truth that we are not in control. And yet, in that space of raw vulnerability, something sacred happens. We start to see clearly. We start to feel things we had long suppressed. And in that furnace of discomfort, something begins to form, something that could never have been shaped in ease or comfort. Purpose is rarely born in moments of victory. It tends to rise from the ashes of suffering. Think of the most meaningful aspects of your character: resilience, compassion, courage, patience. These are not qualities handed to you in times of celebration. They're forged in the crucible of hardship. You don't learn endurance by strolling through sunny fields. You learn it when you're crawling through darkness, unsure if there's even light ahead. That's where your purpose begins to take shape, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Pain demands presence. When you're hurting, you're not thinking about tomorrow or yesterday. You're anchored to the now, to the immediate reality of what is. That grounding, painful as it is, can become a place of encounter, a place where you stop pretending, stop performing, and start becoming real. And in becoming real, you get closer to your true self, the version of you that is not performative, not curated, but authentic and alive. It's not romantic to say that pain has purpose. It's not easy to believe that something good can come from something so brutal. But if you look back on your life, you'll likely find that the moments that broke you also revealed you. They showed you what mattered. They refined what was weak and exposed what was strong. Pain is not kind, but it is clarifying. It doesn't feel like a gift, but it often leaves behind something more valuable than comfort ever could, a life that means something. Faith is easy when life is predictable, when things are going well, when prayers are answered, when there's a clear sense of direction. Believing comes naturally, but the real test of faith doesn't happen in daylight. It happens in the dark, in the uncertainty, in the silence that stretches longer than you ever thought you could bear. That's where real faith is born, not in the presence of clarity, but in its absence. We often treat faith as a feeling, something we can hold on to when it's convenient and comforting, but feelings are fleeting. They shift with circumstances, with moods, with the unpredictable nature of life itself. If faith is only present when things are going our way, then it isn't faith at all. It's just emotional dependence. True faith, the kind that withstands the storms of life, is the faith that persists when nothing makes sense. It's the decision to trust not because you see the outcome, but because you choose to believe even when the outcome is hidden. Faith forged in darkness is different from the kind of faith that thrives in ease. It is tested. It is stripped of sentimentality and wishful thinking. It doesn't rely on visible evidence. Instead, it forces a person to confront their deepest fears, the fear of being alone, the fear of being abandoned, the fear that nothing matters. And when faith survives that confrontation, it emerges stronger, sharper, and more resilient than before. It is no longer fragile, no longer dependent on constant reassurance. It stands on its own. There is a profound shift that happens when someone moves from a faith that requires proof to a faith that endures without it. It's the moment when belief becomes independent of circumstances, when trust is no longer conditional. This kind of faith doesn't panic when prayers go unanswered. It doesn't crumble under harm. Uncertainty. It remains steady, not because the person holding it is strong, but because they have come to understand something deeper, something unshakable. This process is not comfortable. It's painful. It requires letting go of the expectation that God will always explain himself, that life will always be fair, that things will always turn out as we hope. But in that letting go, something more profound is found. The ability to stand firm in the unknown, to walk forward without guarantees, to believe without seeing. That is the kind of faith that cannot be broken. Not because it never faces doubt, but because it has learned to survive it. We spend much of our lives surrounded by noise, external distractions, constant opinions, endless notifications, and internal chatter that never seems to stop. In that environment, it becomes difficult to hear anything deeper than the surface of our minds. We confuse movement with progress, activity with purpose, but real transformation, the kind that reshapes your soul, often requires solitude, not isolation, not abandonment, but intentional separation, the kind that removes the noise so you can finally hear what matters. Spiritual growth is not something that can be outsourced. No one can do it for you. There are moments when you must be alone, not because you are being punished, but because solitude is the only context in which certain truths can be revealed. It's in that quiet space where the distractions fall away that you begin to meet the parts of yourself you've long avoided, the parts that ache, the parts that doubt, the parts that are still waiting to be acknowledged. And it's only in meeting those parts that healing can begin. When you're alone, truly alone, you're forced to confront the raw, unedited version of yourself. There's no performance, no pretending, no audience to impress. And while that experience can be uncomfortable, even painful, it's also deeply sacred. It's in solitude that you learn to sit with your fear instead of running from it, to face your past instead of covering it up, to listen for God not in thunderous miracles, but in the stillness that speaks more honestly than any sermon ever could. People often mistake solitude for emptiness, but in reality, it is full of potential. It's a womb, not a grave. Something is being formed in that space. Something tender, something strong, something deeply rooted. Spiritual growth doesn't need applause. It doesn't thrive under the spotlight. It develops in secret, in quiet, in the hidden spaces where you begin to ask better questions, not just about the world, but about your place in it. We live in a culture that teaches us to fear being alone, as if solitude is something to escape rather than embrace. But the truth is, the most meaningful transformations often happen when no one else is around to witness them. It's in those solitary moments that you start to realize you're not really alone at all. You're being shaped, whispered to, refined, not in the chaos, but in the quiet. That's where the soul learns how to grow, not through noise, but through stillness. Waiting is one of the most difficult human experiences because it brings us face to face with our own limits. We can endure almost anything if we know when it will end, but when we're left waiting without answers, without time frames, without clarity, it can feel like a slow unraveling of our peace. We begin to question everything, our decisions, our worth, our direction, even God himself. But the truth is, the waiting is not wasted. It has a function. There is meaning in it, even if we can't yet see it. We are conditioned to move fast, to seek progress, to measure our lives by how quickly things happen. But there are certain things that can't be rushed. Growth, healing, transformation, wisdom. These take time. Not the kind of time that's neatly scheduled or conveniently predictable, but sacred time. Time that tests, refines, and deepens. The waiting season is often where the groundwork for real change is laid, silently and invisibly beneath the surface. In that in-between space where nothing seems to be moving, something vital is happening within you. Your desires are being purified. Your motives are being clarified. Your trust is being stretched. What feels like stagnation is often preparation. Just because you can't see progress doesn't mean there isn't any. Some of the most important growth happens in hidden places, like roots pushing down before a tree can break the surface. If you pull away too early because you don't see results, you risk walking away just before the breakthrough. Waiting doesn't mean God is absent. It doesn't mean you're forgotten. It may mean that the timing you want is not the timing you need. Often, the very thing you're asking for is good, but you're not yet ready to carry it. And so, in love, not punishment, you're asked to wait. Because what's being formed in you is as important as what you're waiting for. This kind of waiting requires faith of a different kind. Not the faith that believes for a miracle, but the faith that believes there's purpose in the silence, that holds on when there's no confirmation, that stays when leaving would be easier. Waiting doesn't weaken faith. It reveals its depth. It asks you to trust, not just in what God will do, but in who he is when he does nothing at all. There is a deep meaning in the waiting, not always visible, not always immediate, but always forming something essential. The kind of inner life that can carry the weight of the blessing when it finally comes. So if you find yourself in the silence, wondering if your cries have gone unnoticed, if your pain has any meaning, or if you're simply lost in the void, I urge you to reconsider what the silence is saying. Maybe it's not rejection. Maybe it's reverence. Maybe heaven is holding its breath, not because it has forgotten you, but because it's watching something sacred unfold in you. You are not alone in this. The silence is not a void, it's a place of becoming. The pain isn't pointless, it's preparing you. The waiting is not wasted, it's working something deep and eternal within you. You're being shaped, not sidelined, strengthened, not ignored, loved, though it may not feel like it, in a way that is deeper than comfort and more enduring than emotion. Hold fast, breathe deep, keep walking, because when the silence ends, and it will, you will not be the same. You'll be stronger, clearer, more grounded in truth than you ever imagined. And you'll look back, not with bitterness, but with the quiet gratitude of someone who was refined in fire and came out gold. Thank you for listening, for leaning in, and for carrying this message forward, not just in your mind, but in your life. May you find peace, even in the quiet. May you find strength in your steps. And may you never forget, the silence never meant you were alone. Goodbye for now, and thank you from the depths